Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming in. Good to see all your names coming in. We'll get started in just a minute. All right, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I just have a quick intro, so welcome. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Adolescent Mental Health, brought to you by NAMI Cook County North Suburban and Maggie Nash, the Director of Mental Health Education at the Joslin Center. Joslin Center is a nonprofit community mental health provider offering a full range of therapeutic care, including therapy, psychiatry, case management, and employment support, plus psychological testing and intensive outpatient program for youth. More information can be found at www.joslin.org. I'm Heather Kendall, the Outreach Manager at NAMI Cook County North Suburban. NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization, providing public awareness at no cost support and education programs online and in person so that people and families affected by mental health conditions can build better lives. We are a lifeline to individuals and families who do not know what to expect in their difficult life journey. We offer classes and support groups and do a lot of local advocacies for mental health. Our programs are free and open to those in our community service areas. We do not turn anyone away who is in need. So we are pleased to have you all here tonight. This year, each month, mental health professionals will dig deep into a variety of topics to further educate us on our community members' topics of interest. We have had many requests to host a webinar to discuss adolescent mental health. Therefore, we asked Maggie Nash from Joslin to further educate us on this topic, specifically to understand common mental health conditions, gain effective communication technique, and understand the resources that are available. According to NAMI National, 1 in 6 youth experience a mental health condition each year, and only half of them receive treatment. 50% of all lifetimes mental illness begin by age 14 and 75% by age 24. According to the Jed Foundation, suicide is the third leading cause of death among teenagers aged 15 to 10 years old in the United States, while 22% of the high school students reported having seriously considered suicide in the past year. It is apparent that not enough young people are getting support for their mental health. Maggie Nash's presentation will explore the current challenges faced by the youth, the factors contributing to the rise in mental health issues, and practical strategies for supporting adolescents in crisis. We will gain a deeper understanding of common conditions, effective communication techniques, and resources for fostering resilience and well-being in young people. Our Q&A will be held at the end of the presentation. However, if you would like to type questions in the Q&A box during our conversations, please do. So let's introduce our tonight's speaker. Our guest speaker tonight is Maggie Nash. She's the Director of the Mental Health Education at the Joslin Center. She started her career as a teacher, teaching 4th grade, reading and special education in Brooklyn, New York, while receiving her master's in education. After receiving her master's degree, she worked as an instructional coach in Chicago, helping teachers implement student accommodations and building classroom culture. She then pursued her master's in social work at the University of Chicago. Maggie is passionate about teaching and empowering others to better understand mental health and community resources. Currently, the Mental Health Education Department works to provide tiered levels of support to schools through integrated school-based programming, including Joslin's Social Emotional Learning Consultant Program, Mental Health First Aid, and its summer therapeutic day camp called NICA. We are so thrilled to have her tonight to further educate us on this ever important topic. I am honored to welcome our guest speaker, Maggie Nash.
Thank you, Heather. That was a mouthful. I'm going to pull up and share my screen here as I pull up our PowerPoint for today. There was a question on CEUs. I don't know the answer to that one, but I'm sure we'll get to that soon. Okay, so I'm going to start from the beginning. And as Heather said, and I'm sure we've all been talking about teen mental health, adolescent mental health as a big topic of conversation. Um, and so we're going to kind of dive into a little bit more around first defining what is mental health. I think that is a very big buzzword right now. And a lot of what we're hearing from the kids isn't always a correct definition and understanding. And I think that's where we need to start. Do we all have a common language and literacy around what is mental health? What is a mental health challenge? And what is a mental health disorder? Then we're going to talk a little bit about what we are seeing our adolescents struggling with, what they're going through, what are some common concerns, common diagnoses that are coming up, talking about some strategies to support your teen or your students or whatever brings you here today. And then also talking about some strategies, or sorry, some community organizations and Jocelyn as well, of what is out there because you're not alone in supporting your teen and your young person. I want to apologize. It is 7 o'clock and I have been teaching and doing workshops all day. So I'm like to teachers. So I'm going to try to make sure I'm catching myself as I'm talking and not over talking and stumbling over my words. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers. I like to ask this question before I do anything, especially when we're working with our teens. If you had the option, would you choose to relive high school? Now, when I'm working with teachers, majority of them are like, absolutely not, even high school teachers. Then there's always that one person that's like, yes, I loved it. It was my best. Good for you. The majority of us didn't have a great experience. That's because developmentally, you're not supposed to. We are going through so many transitions during this time, both with our body, with our understanding of our emotions, with our, breaking apart with our independence from our family, getting ready to go off to either getting a job or go to college, all of these different things that are coming. It is a really hard time. And so I want us to sit in that empathy and remind ourselves that we also struggled and we are going to be okay. And prevention and early prevention is key, right? So better having these conversations earlier will better support your teen in the long run. So as I mentioned, and some of the work that I do is also doing workshops for teens themselves in schools. And I always start with this because before we do anything, we're going to ground ourselves in a common definition. First, mental health is thinking, feeling, and acting. Every single one of us does that. Every single person has mental health. Hard stop. Everyone thinks, everyone feels, everyone acts. Okay. Then we have mental health challenges. And I think this is where it gets muddy with some of our teens and even ourselves. A mental health challenge is 2 weeks or more of not thinking or feeling or acting the way that you want to. That's not having a bad day. That's not having a bad week. I'm having not a great week. That doesn't mean we're rushing to the therapist. We're not rushing and catastrophizing that it's never going to get better. That's kind of part of life. Now, if you're going 2 weeks or more and you start lashing out, or you're withdrawing, or you're saying things you don't mean, or you're not showing up the way that you used to, you're noticing a big change in the way in which you think, feel, and act, that's when we say, let's get some help. That doesn't mean you're going to be diagnosed with something. That just means, hey, it's time to take a step back and take care of your mental health. Just like if you were to sprain your ankle, right? And you might notice, hey, I'm not feeling great after 2 weeks. I tried to ice, I tried to do all these things. I got to go to the doctor. That doesn't mean you're going to be a sprained ankle forever. That just means we've got to get a professional involved, some way, shape, or form. So that's where this stands. And then we have a diagnosis or a mental health disorder. This is by a professional. So I always tell the teens, I joke, don't take my job. I am a licensed therapist. I went to 2 years of school, lots of debt to do this job. You can't take it just like you wouldn't take a doctor's job. Make sure we're not diagnosing. This is by a mental health provider, and it's going to have a long-term plan, right? It may be that you have to start seeing a therapist. You may need medication. You may need a therapist once a month to do some check-ins, whatever that looks like. That doesn't mean we can't live a wonderful, healthy life, but it might be a longer-term check-in, making sure we're taking care of ourselves. Just like for our physical health, if you are diagnosed with, I have arthritis, right? I have to go do specific things to take care of myself, but I can still live a wonderful, healthy life. Okay, so those are those three differences. We also have this spectrum of mental health. which again, these are all the pictures that I also see that I show our teens when we do our teen workshop to our teens. And notice here that healthy coping, stressed is also in the healthy zone. A lot of our teens are living in this space because that is high school, but they are healthy. They are healthy if they are able to cope through stressful situations healthily to a point where it's going to be in the long term better for them. Meaning they may fail a test, they end up freaking out about it, being all upset. They go for a run, they come back, they study, we're not holding on to it. We go to school the next day, we're feeling okay. That's the healthy zone. They may be stressed for a little bit, but we ended up coping correctly, long term, more appropriate and more healthy. If we're really stressed, we fail, and then we end up saying, I'm never going to be anything. This test is my everything. I start uh, skipping classes. I start utilizing substances, any of that kind of stuff. Now we're getting into the space where that is unhealthy in the long term, where it's not going to be beneficial. And we could stand in this unhealthy space where we are unable to cope through tough situations. This doesn't necessarily mean we have a diagnosis, right? Doesn't mean we have a long-term thing. It means we're unhealthy right now with our mental health and we got to take care of ourselves. Because if not, it's going to continue and just get worse and worse. A lot of our teens teeter this line because they're also learning what it means to be and hold healthy coping. So it's okay if they're teetering those lines. That's developmentally appropriate. It's now our as adults to help them figure out what is healthy, what does feel good for you. When are we reaching that part of unhealthy? We know that exercising and all like eating and all of that kind of stuff can lead towards unhealthy, but it can still stay in the healthy space sometimes. Here is what symptoms and signs may look like. And if you look these over, it also feels very similar to what a teen may just present as. You're like, oh, yeah, risky behavior. Impulsiveness. Sometimes lack of motivation. It's usually, I would say, two or more of these things, and it's a big shift or change. Okay, so we're seeing our teens who used to show up to class, used to, really be motivated at their work and all these things start to shift. They're not going to class anymore. They're withdrawing. They're going into their room. They're no longer showing up to class. Their grades are tanking. That's when we were like, all right, let's take a look. We know that these are possible signs and symptoms. Again, if you are not, this is not a crash course on how to be a therapist or a social worker to diagnose. This is saying, I should maybe be concerned. Let me check in. It can lead to this disorder, but that doesn't necessarily mean that. That can also be a typical teen that's needing some support right now to get themselves back on track, right? Think sprained ankle versus being diagnosed with arthritis or diabetes. We also know that if we have a sign or symptom, that it can get worse or better depending on how many risk factors or protective factors are in that student's lives. So risk factors are things that can make things really tough. That can be also considered a traumatic event, divorce, loss of a loved one. It could be a move that doesn't feel good. That can cause our teens to start to feel extra or to make things feel worse, or it can be harder to cope through things. And then protective factors can be things like close group of friends, family, consistent food, water, shelter, any of that kind of stuff can lead that sort of protective factors that can actually help them work through harder things because they know that is a stable thing in their life. Here's sort of broken out, and actually there's an activity we do, and actually Heather and I both do teen mental health first aid, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end of this presentation, but they actually map out some of the risk and protective factors within social, biological, and psychological. So for social factors, one of the number one risk factors for a teen developing some level of mental health issue is bullying, right? Protective factor would be a healthy relationship. Even one. It takes one trusting, caring adult to change the trajectory of a child's life. Biological, sometimes it's just run in our family. It can be genetic, our chemical imbalances, which again is happening a lot in our teens' brains because they're developing their frontal cortex. So it may not be fully there yet, but some of it is also just passed down from generations, can be part of just their makeup as well. And then psychological factors are that mindset. So growth versus fixed mindset, we see that a lot in schools now. That's part of the social emotional learning piece. Are they experiencing trauma at a really young age that hasn't been processed? That can then lead to developing something in the long run. So that's sort of the overall overarching idea of mental health. What are we now seeing as a current state for teen mental health or adolescent mental health? We all know that this came out during COVID. We were talking about how there was a crisis. Um, while COVID feels very long ago, we have not coped from it. We have not fully healed. And so we are still experiencing the repercussions. Whether or not we would have seen mental health spike, whether COVID was here or not, it definitely heightened the level of stressors and issues and concerns and struggles that our teens are going through for a variety of reasons. First off, I just want to point out that during COVID, we actually were forced to experience mental health symptoms. When I tell teens this, they're like, oh, I'm like, right, you were forced to isolate. You were forced to lose any type of connection except for on your social media, right? Or on your phone. I sound so old. On the social media. We were forced to have big life adjustments. We had life stressors. We were taken our coping mechanisms were taken away from us and we were sitting in this space with them, right? They couldn't walk through the hallways and talk to their friends. After school sports were cut. All of these different things, social skills, things like this that were helping us through whatever it may be, was taken. And then we were sitting in caution, right? We were sitting in constant caution of thinking about what if this happens and the unknown. And actually, the definition of anxiety is the unknown. So now, not only are we isolated, which is leaning in towards depression, it's also feeding anxiety. And now we've got all of these things. And then they were pushed back into school. And here we are, right? And now we're like, okay, I'm not sure we took the time. Have we fully healed? Have we fully understand where we're at? Have we been able to figure out ways to adjust and talk to our teens about what did happen and process everything? And so I think that's one of the factors that is leading towards, and again, this isn't a if this, then this situation. It isn't a either or, it's a both and of all sorts of what is going on with our teens. There's a few things. One is that we are seeing key transitions happening earlier, right? So we have COVID, we have all of that was going on. We also have key transitions happening earlier. We're actually seeing, and this was starting before the pandemic, adolescents are hitting puberty at a very young age, meaning we're seeing kids. I work in elementary schools and I see kids at second grade where we used to be in high school, right? And so we're seeing this shift and they're getting consistent. They're still being told to respond in a certain way and still need to live as a child, but they're also experiencing these key transitions really early. And the real question is, are we teaching enough coping skills and strategies and validating the struggles as early as that young of age to help them navigate this transition? We're seeing the destigmatizing of mental health, which is wonderful. And are we talking about it correctly? I think right now, a lot of the teens are leaning in towards this sort of collective view of we all have this, or we're all experience this, or it's kind of this like Instagram trend. Are we now, and this is what I tell them, are you talking about it correctly? Because the more and more, if we don't talk about it correctly, we're actually stigmatizing, we're not destigmatizing, right? So how do we understand anxiety versus feeling anxious? How do we understand being diagnosed with depression versus feeling depressed, which is a full workshop I have for teens to break down those definitions and better understand what that looks like. Then the, the thing we love to talk about the most, social media. I have done so many talks on teen social media. It's not great, especially for how young they are. Younger than I'd say 16, and whoever's read Anxious Generation knows, younger than 16, our teens' brains are really not ready for it. They are getting all of these things coming at them at once, and we don't have the process and created uh, uh, frontal cortex to really process it all. And so they're not having coping mechanisms. They're actually supposed to be leaning into risky behaviors. And now they're given this thing that has a slew of risky behaviors they can engage in. And so developmentally, it's appropriate for them to want to do these things, but their brains shouldn't right now. And it's causing extra anxiety. It's causing a struggle of how to process what is real and what's not. Right. And so I do think this is a big topic of conversation. It should continue to be as we navigate how to um, really structure the way in which our young people are experiencing and utilizing this. One of the activities we do in Teen Mental Health First Aid is to ask them what they feel the impact of social media is on their brains. And they always say they know it's not great. They also know there's some positive, but they're never taught how to use it. Right. So they're told it's bad all the time, even though they know some of it is okay, but they're never told, okay, this is how this looks. When you're feeling this way, this is actually leaning to you feeling worse, right? You go on Instagram, you're going to feel worse. So how do they learn the skills to say, let me put the phone down because it's making the situation worse, not better? And that's what we want to start working on too. As you can see here, I have some suggested solutions. They're not the only solutions and the end all be all, but just some thoughts around like how do we not just sit in a problem space, but a solution oriented space too. Okay, so there's the definitions, there's what's going on right now and what we're seeing with our kids. And then the next piece is how do we as the adults navigate some of this? I actually created this workshop. I work a lot with teens. I work with teens in a variety of different spaces from all the way from Zion to Chicago. And I've kind of collected the responses that they're looking for from their adults now. We know that as a teen, they're actually supposed to push back. So you may say, Maggie, I would say, like, you can blame me. Maggie, I tried all your strategies and they still said you're lame. Yup, they're supposed to, right? They're going to give us solutions and then they're going to still not want it because developmentally that is still appropriate. I used to have only teen clients and I would say, they'd be like, I'm like, sorry. I'm like, you're being really annoying and you're supposed to be. This is exactly what you're supposed to be right now. You're supposed to be pushing against, you're supposed to be trying to figure out your independence. You're supposed to be pushing against authority. Like these are all appropriate. And as an adult, I'm putting these guide rails on. I'm going to keep trying this because I care about you and I'm having these conversations with you. And because you've told me some strategies, I'm going to keep doing that. So here they are. These are some of them that they've given. This idea of first expressing love, being curious around what they're feeling and how, because they need to learn this. They don't need to be told it. We want to navigate a conversation. We want to help identify the best we can. I have a master's degree in identifying feelings and it's still difficult. So know that we're never going to land on like the exact, like, yep, that's the right feeling. But it helps put a name on it and then express concern or consequences. So here's a few of the sentence starters that they provided me. I care about you. I've noticed this. When you give a teen a fact, they can't argue it. I noticed that we fell asleep in class. You can't be like, no, you didn't. You're like, no, no, you were snoring. Like, nope, you didn't turn in your homework. Nope, you didn't put your phone in the thing it was supposed to be, right? I've noticed this. I'm not sure I'm doing this correctly. Tell a teen you're not doing something correctly. Model not knowing everything because they may say, well, you don't know anything. But what they're really feeling is insecurity. That's what they're supposed to. Adolescents are so insecure right now. Their bodies are growing, their brains are growing, they're awkward, they don't fit in their clothes. The whole thing is hard. And so we want to make sure that we're also modeling some of that for them too. If like, you don't need to know everything, you don't need to be perfect right now. Do you want to find a solution or do you want me just to listen? Sometimes our teens just want to word vomit. That's my like fourth grade language. They just need to get it all out there. They leave and you're stuck with it. And you're like, what? Wait a second. And they're totally fine. Developmentally appropriate. Sounds really tough. It's not permanent, but I'm sorry you're going through this. Let kids know they're not going to last forever. You can't promise they won't feel it again. You can't promise they'll wake up and feel better tomorrow. You can say this isn't going to be permanent because we know that feelings don't last forever. That's a fact. You can't promise their trauma or their home situation or any of that's going to go away, but this feeling won't last forever. Now we want to be curious about the feeling, right? Where did they see this happen? If they're coming in with this big emotion, this big behavior, this big like upset, where did it happen? Who was there? How did people respond? Put yourself in the situation because you can't always be there with your kids, but you want to kind of sit in the bench near them. You want to pretend you're next to them as they're going through it. How are you feeling before? How did that make you feel after? What was that like for you? Have you felt this way before? That allows them to get a clue into the mystery of feelings because feelings are really tough. I was throwing a ball and I dropped it, and then this person hit me, and so I screamed. I'm like, you probably were embarrassed that you dropped the ball, and now we're lashing out this way, right? We want to give some insight on that. Um, I love the sentence. That's a really big thing to say. What do you mean by that? Instead of don't say that, because you can't tell them what to say and what not to say. And you're now the authority being like, that was really big. And if they say it wasn't big, it was big for me to hear. It might not be big for you to hear. So what did you mean? Because what I'm hearing was pretty big, right? We know some of our kids are like throwing things out, or I'm just going to go do this, or I'm never going to go to school. That's a really big thing to say. Hold the weight of what they're actually saying so they can understand the impact of it. Okay. And then the impact. What do you think will happen? What are you most worried about? I was working with a teen and they're like, I don't want to go where our SEL program actually does referrals to Jocelyn to get there. But I don't want to do it. I was like, okay, what's the worst situation that's going to happen? Well, I'm not going to have anything to say. Okay. And so you sit in some awkwardness. What's the worst situation? And they're like, all right, I could do that. I was like, then you report back how awkward it was. You tell me how this felt, right? So talk about it, because usually it's way more worked up in their head than it really is going to be when it plays out. Identify the feeling. This actually came from my own parents. My mom always asked me, do you feel sad or are you angry? And I was like, oh, are you excited or are you nervous? Do you not know how to do it or do you not want to do it? Now, they might not know, but you can engage in it with them, because those are the different, like sad and angry are two different things, right? Excited and nervous are different. Identify the feeling. Are you worried you can't do it or do you not want to? Two different things. Remind me, this reminds me when you did blank. So you want to cue back into when they did use strategies. How did it feel when that happened, right? Oh, I remember you were really upset about this test. What happened? Okay, you got a B. Yeah, it wasn't your best, but were you okay? Have you ever thought about it since? No. Okay. So we've gotten this before. Even if it was the worst thing that ever happened, they're still sitting next to you, okay, right? This is, again, we're not in crisis. We're not in a space where we're rushing to get, so we're engaging in conversations to help our teens navigate these feelings. Take a break. Kids need breaks. Teens definitely. If they're not ready to have that conversation, don't push it. Because I don't know about you, I feel like I'm still a teen at heart. Like if somebody tells me to do something, I kind of want to do the opposite. Our kids have that naturally too when they're that age. So let them take a break. Take a break. I'm gonna circle back though, because as a parent, it's my job to make sure I'm checking in on you. So I'm gonna do that. But let them have that space. Hmm. I always say understanding does not mean enabling. They still get consequences. Just because we've had this lovey-dovey discussion does not mean we also have to see what if this, then this. This is that, right? There are logical consequences. I was working with an individual who snuck out of her house, got out the window and broke her foot. Mom's like, what else should I be doing? I was like, literally nothing. She can't go anywhere. Don't do anything else. She cannot go to the party she wanted to. She has a broken foot. That's fine. Now, if she starts sneaking out on the broken foot, we've got a different problem. But right now, this is the logical consequence, or that's the natural consequence. The logical consequence may be if it didn't break, that we have to, maybe it's take our phone, or we're not allowed to go to our friends, or whatever is going to teach the skill. Okay. Check in to see how they're feeling. The one thing I would really suggest with teens, don't close the door, because you want to be that safe space when they're at some rock bottom. Whether you like it or not, you want to be the person they come to, right? We do want to provide that space for them. That doesn't mean that consequences don't happen, though. And if you're feeling like this is out of your lane, that's where you might say, hey, you know what? There are professionals, right? If I broke my ankle, my parent just kept holding me the whole time, we got a problem, right? And they didn't take me to the doctors. So it's the same thing. If we see that, start to have those conversations, hey, there's an adult for you that can also work through this, who's trained to do it. And of course, the classic question of if a teen doesn't want the help, ask and be curious of why. Be curious of the reason. Is it you're nervous you're worried you're going to sit in silence? Cool. Not the end of the world. Make sure you're discussing without judgment. Listen to what their concerns are. Is it time? Is it money? Is it what their friends are going to think? Listen to it all so that we can start to break it down? Because in the end, If they are going through something that we're worried is going to be longer than that 2, 3 weeks or more, we do want to start to have that conversation. You're not in a crisis. A crisis is immediate risk for yourself or others. So there is still some time. But we don't want to just be like, you need to do this and force it on them. Therapy doesn't work if the kid isn't ready to do it. But getting him in the room, then okay, the therapist can then figure it out. Right? I always tell my teens, I'm like, you're my tool. And so I need to trust that you're telling me and you're ready to do it and you're ready to change, or else it's not going to work. But with a young person, sometimes just having a relationship with that adult until they're ready to do the work is important. But you got to get them there and they got to show up consistently and they can't hate it or resent you for it. Those two things can be true at once. If that makes sense. I've talked a lot about these like different conversations and discussions you can have. I do want to point out though, these are not crisis spaces. If you have a teen that's in crisis, we usually say if you're at risk of harm for yourself or others. So if that is the case, meaning there's aggression or violence where you're worried about your safety or your kid's safety, we call 911. Non-suicidal self-injury, talk to a professional if they don't have somebody else that has eyes on them yet. And thoughts of suicide is also making sure that we're calling a professional. Okay, because we don't want, and I always tell a kid, I'm like, I can't lose you. And so I'm going to work to understand because I'm not going to lose you. And you matter, as Heather knows from the Team Mental First Aid video. This is one of my favorite things. I was listening to, I don't know if anyone knows Dr. Becky, a podcast, and she just kind of described it as holding the chaos. A lot of times with our teens, our job as the adult is to hold the chaos. I will say if your teen is going to school, getting good grades or getting grades, being respectful, and then comes home and loses it, you're doing your job. Nice work. Because they have put it all together. They have put it, as even as an adult, it's hard to go to school, to work, go to work from 9 to 5 and come home and not have a little bit of like, blah, right? And so our kids are even more, they're still growing. And so let them, if they're doing all like, I only see this at home. I don't see it at school. Great. That means you're the safe space. Keep being the safe space. Okay. It's okay to say, wow, that sucks to a kid. Please do. Sometimes they just need to hear it because if you try to fix it or go down all of this stuff and then they leave and they're fine and you're sitting trying to problem solve it, you're also working yourself into something, right? And so we want to make sure that we understand kids right now are supposed to have big feelings when they're adolescents. They're supposed to feel really happy at 1 second and really horrible the next second, right? I taught 8th grade once and I was like, this is wild. It's a wild ride. They come in, they're smiling, they're doing this. And then the next time, this person hates me. And then they're holding hands. I'm like, how did this happen? They're okay. um, and if it feels like they're not seeing themselves the way they need to, their thinking, feeling, and acting has changed. That's where we really want to have a conversation. And you're not alone. So Jocelyn has a lot of kids services. I believe it's over 50% of our population we serve are 18 or younger. We have psychotherapy, psychiatric services, youth services. We have a teen IOP, an intensive outpatient program in Grays Lake. We have a therapeutic day camp that I run in the summer. Nuestra Center is for our Latino young individuals in Highwood. Yes, in Highwood. Our school supports are the SEL consultants that we place in schools to help teachers and students get the support they need with their social emotional learning. And then we have a lot of community programs as well. I will say we're about 80% Medicaid and 20% of private insurance, but we take almost any insurance, and we also have a sliding scale. We are located in Northbrook, Highland Park, so it's Highland Park, Waukegan, Grays Lake. So as I've mentioned, Heather is a teen mental health first aid instructor. We also do youth mental health first aid, which is some of the content that you heard today has been taken from some of that as well. It is an amazing program. We offer community-based programming, free for the community. I believe our next one's in May, and it helps you understand, recognize, and respond to mental health challenges in young people. It's a really, really great program. And then we also do the teen program, which is for our teens. So here we're at GBS. We train in almost, I think it's 15 schools in the area and partner directly with five big districts in the area to roll out youth and teen mental health first aid. The teens do love this. That is the one thing I will say, which is wild. Teens don't like anything. They're like, the videos were really cool. I was like, cool, great, thanks. They do like it. I think Heather, your teens gave 100% on all of the feedback. Like 100% loved it. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think they really enjoy because they get to talk to each other so much. That's what they really like about that. That's what they always ask for, more interaction, not
Yeah.
with themselves, with each other.
But with topics they want to talk about, right? It's not just like sitting in a room with their phones. They are actually forced to have a conversation, but then they go for it, right? They want to. They're hungry for it.
You open up.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and you can see here this is the social media activity we were doing. This is our IOP. We actually have it for 8 to 18 years old. It's about 3 days a week that your teen would be pulled out of school or your 8-year-old up. And they would miss half a day to gain skills to navigate what we just explained. Some of the big things that are happening, our teens may not be ready for academics fully, and they need that extra support. Just like you may, if you break an ankle, you may need to go to PT. This is kind of how I think this is like a more intensive version of that, so that our kids have those skills and then can navigate from there. Here's more of Jocelyn's resources. Feel free to join our newsletter. If you scan this, it'll get you there. If you have any other questions, you can always message me. I know we'll have some time to answer and ask some questions. I also have these resources here that I pulled. I can go back to our Jocelyn page in a second. But there is like a psychologist discussing the state of teen adolescents right now, kind of the big issues that are coming up. Compass, SunCloud, Glenview, Northbrook, Youth Services. And our teen resource page is created by teens for teens. And it actually, if you open it, it gives a direction of how to get to the social worker's office in all the schools that our junior board partners with. So we have North Shore Country Day, Woodlands, GBN, GBS, New Trier, Evanston, a few other spaces. And so the teens wrote out the directions of how to get to the social worker's office, because what they were experiencing is they're always told to go there, but they don't know how to get there or who the person is or what to do when they get there. We also broke down what does it mean when they call, let's say, the 988, the suicide hotline. We broke down, the kids called and then broke down what to expect so that they can read and be ready, because it can be really scary to do that for the first time. And so our teen resource page has all of that. Oh, Heather, I don't know if I should leave some of this up or if we want to make space. I think I saw the chat going off and I was not.
Oh, no,
Oh,
we can, there's a couple questions. The first one is, will this event provide CEUs for professionals? We do not have CEUs for this one, but I would reach out to your organization to see if they have a way to use this as part of a CEU, and then you can send it in. I did have a question about, will we be getting a copy of the slide presentation? I
I don't, that's up to,
normally, okay, I think, well, we're recording this, so you can always go back and take notes. I think that some of Jocelyn's and some of like the youth mental health first aid things are proprietary, so we'd like to keep that within that realm, but you're more than welcome to rewatch it in different parts and take notes for sure. And then the last question was, what can cause the gaps in memory?
so many things. That's a really broad question. Um, I think there's a few things. One, our kids are holding a lot. I think high school is one of the most stressful and packed schedules that an individual will ever have. Meaning they're up at 6 a.m. and they've got after school practice, they have this. So naturally, I do think that things will drop. I think we can think of, if we think of executive functioning skills, some of our kids, especially with social media and really quick, like TikTok is a very quick, flipping through, and the attention span can start to shorten. A lot of things are gamified now. And I think that is, while it may be fun, it is causing our kids to not want to sit in boredom. And then what's happening is we're not always taking in everything we need to because we're like, oh, I'm bored. What's the next thing? Right? I don't know if that's necessarily what you meant with gaps of memory. If it's feeling like it's really inhibiting the individual, I would get it looked at to make sure that there's nothing else that's there, whether it's a learning disability or something else. If it feels like it's not what you're usually seeing with your young person, talk to your doctor. Um, Always get an outside referral of some sort to see what that looks like. But I do think our teens are also holding a lot too.
I had a question about social media and bullying. Have you ever had to have a conversation where a student or a teen has brought up to you about them being bullied at school, and like what was something that you helped them through with the resources for that?
So many times. I'm like, I think my most of the work I did when I was a therapist and my clients were all teenagers was working through bullying or inappropriate use on social media. Um, a lot of times I talk through what causes somebody to hurt somebody else. Because that is one, if we think of SEL and there are different components, we have self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, and relationship management, and then decision making. And to be better understand why somebody does something, we kind of take a breath of like, oh, it's not all about me, right? Now it's almost as if it's not okay this person did this, but somebody who doesn't feel good about themselves or feels like they can get away with something without repercussions has something else going on, right? So there is that component of it. I talk a lot about control and out of control. What is in your control in this space? What would you like to do? What can you do? And then if you do go to that, let's say they're like, I've had a few teens be like, I want to go talk to them. I'm like, okay, let's prepare for them to say, absolutely, yes, I love that you came to me. And then let's prepare for them to say, go away, you're lame, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. And let's get ready for both of those responses. And what does that look like? How does that feel? Because it's not in our control how somebody else responds to us. If it's to a point of like assault or really inappropriate, we have to report it. So I always make sure like if it is like a extremely inappropriate, we do need to either bring it to a parent or to the school, because that needs to be handled or
That
to the
was
police.
that was my next question. And
Mhm.
once it gets to a certain point, do you ask them to go to another adult, like another trusted adult about this, someone at the school that can do something?
Yeah, so it's what's hard is schools uh, try their best, but
Mhm.
schools are holding and playing every role possible now, right? They're like everywhere. Like at first, like those things were happening at home, and we're like, okay. They're happening on, the sidewalk, and it's maybe getting brought in, but it's not. Now it's like everything is on the school. Um, I think if it's getting it's still reporting to somebody, or it's calling police or reporting it that way. Um, Yes, and sometimes that doesn't always solve everything. It may be blocking, it may be getting off that's why I do think kids shouldn't have social media until I 16. They should have flip phones. But I do think it's just too easy to get away with things and we don't have as much consequences, as many accountabilities, and our kids are going to they're going to try to take risks. They're supposed to. Does
It,
that kind of make sense?
yeah, it does. It does. It's just that I guess it like your presentation, and I just watched Adolescents on Netflix recently. So that's why it brought up that question of when would be a good time to tell a trusted adult, because we talk about that a lot in youth and we talk about that in teen. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's if you don't feel comfortable or safe. Um, if we think it's getting like a mean moment and we can have a conversation, but when in doubt, if you have a trusted adult, talk to them, right? To see how that feels. Whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach, we kind of know that whole drill, but it's important because as a teen, I don't think I would have known how to respond, and I still don't always know how to respond to my friend who just had a freak out and lashed out at me. I'm like, ooh. Like our kids are too, right? Um, so it's hard.
Yeah, I think it is hard. I just thought of something else. Like as an adult, I know you touched on it, like how to talk to them, but what would be a good way to like keep up with like the slang or things that are going on social media? Do you ever like have talks with that to adults? Like, do you ever?
Interesting. No. I always just say I'm old and I don't know what's cool. That's a kid just said something, just, do you know what that means? I'm like, no, I don't. Thank you for asking. And I would love for you to tell me, but I also don't need to know. Just tell me what do I need to know about it? Um, it's a little cringy for us to try to know, as long as it's and we want to make sure our kids are being appropriate.
Yeah.
So we want to still teeter that line of adult and not try to be like slay and be all trying to be
Oh,
cool. It's a little tough. Um, but if there's things that don't feel age appropriate or any of that, give it a try. But every generation has had some level of language that was coded for teens. Like I'm
very.
sure we can think of, right? Like and do the kids always, the problem is kids these days, see, lame and old. Kids now have a way to look it up where we didn't.
That's right. And
Like,
there are there are resources like there's several teachers that are on like TikTok and Instagram. One is called Mr. Lindsay. He tells you what all the slang means in a nice way. So it's just an easy way to yeah.
yeah.
No. I'm just
It's a
worried.
both and. I feel like sometimes let the kids have some slang too. Like,
No, it's the bad it's like the slang that could be hurtful or bullying is
yes,
yeah.
that we don't want.
That we don't want. So that would be just something to keep in mind. But yeah, anyway. But yes, you have enlightened me as always, and I always enjoy listening to you talk because it just opens up so many different portals in my mind. And I know
So,
that you really enjoy working with teens, and that's one of the best things. Yeah. So,
it takes a special person.
oh, they are fun though. They can be
They're
very
so fun.
and I will be taking some of this with me with when we go to self-care kits tomorrow. That you know you're supposed to be doing this. It's okay. I think that's something that they forget too. That they don't have to be perfect. Yeah. I don't think I have any other
Do I stop sharing?
yeah.
Oh,
Did
there you
you?
go.
Okay.
I haven't stopped sharing yet.
Oh, I
Sure if
think
there's any other
yeah.
questions. Oh,
No other questions.
wow.
Um, Yeah, so I think we are all finished. I just have a quick little wrap up and
Okay.
then um I just wanted to say thank you again. I know you're going through a lot, so I appreciate you coming. And again, that's why I turned my video on because I was like, I'm sitting here smiling and laughing. I need to let Maggie know
I
that
really appreciated that because it was like I like seeing a face being like, I'm like, okay,
I was
okay.
like, yes, yes, like so, all right, I'll wrap up and thank you all. So, quick note, if you enjoyed tonight's program, you can find more information about upcoming programs and events at namiccns.org. Our next program will be held on April 23rd from 7 to 8:30 p.m. where NAMI CCNS and the Cancer Wellness Society will host guest speaker Stephanie Aaron to further educate us on navigating mental health and chronic illness. If you've taken our family to family class or attended one of our family support groups, please consider attending our family insight evenings held on the first Wednesday of each month at St. Joseph's Church in Wilmette. More information can be found on our website. Our annual gala is approaching on May 3rd at Sunset Ridge Country Club in Northbrook. You can get your tickets by visiting our website. Once you log off, you will see a brief survey that will allow both of us to better understand your comfort level with today's topic, as well as provide us with information we need to raise money to continue providing free mental health services in the Cook County North suburban area. We appreciate your presence tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again at a NAMI CCNS community webinar. Please take care of yourself and each other. All right. Thank you all. Have a good night. Thank you, Maggie, again.
Thanks all. Have a good
Yeah.
one.
Bye.
Bye.